So my first exposure to the concept of executive functioning was actually when I was in kindergarten. You see, I like to talk and hum and visit with my neighbors, and sometimes things got boring, so then I'd roam around the classroom, and the teachers didn't like that. And I didn't like it when they told me I couldn't do those things, so occasionally I threw a temper tantrum or two. That landed me straight in the corner. And my mom had a problem with that because kindergarten was not free back then, and I was spending almost every day in the corner. You see, I was having trouble with the two major areas of executive functioning. I was having trouble inhibiting my behavior and emotional regulation. But that's okay, because I was 5 years old, and those executive functioning skills are not even fully developed until late adolescence. The other major executive functioning skills are verbal and working memory, and planning and problem solving. And when people have difficulty in multiple areas that affects a large area of social functioning, such as social functioning, a large area of a life functioning, such as social functioning, then a person's likely to be labeled or be given a diagnosis of a disability. However, all of us can have trouble with executive functioning from time to time, and here's why. Here's an example of the normal flow of information into our brain. First of all, information enters through our senses and is processed, in this example, in the visual cortex, and then that information is sent on to the prefrontal cortex. That's the area of the brain actually responsible for executive functioning. In that area of the brain, the information is analyzed, and the best possible solution is decided upon and then sent to the motor cortex for action. However, when we're under stress, especially chronic stress, that normal flow of information is interrupted. Often the prefrontal cortex is actually skipped. Visual information enters, is processed, and then sent straight to the motor cortex without the important analysis. And that's really important because that analysis is like that little voice in our head that helps us reason, helps us generate multiple possible solutions to a problem, actually helps us question and reflect on any decisions that we've currently decided upon and say, is this really the right decision? And then also take into consideration social norms and expectations, and decide on a course of action that really meets all of those goals and is most likely to give us the best outcome. So without that analysis, we go straight into action without actually analyzing and thinking about the consequences possibly to our behaviors. So you can see that it doesn't require that we have a disability to have difficulty in executive functioning. I'm actually going to show you some images that will help you understand how executive functioning can manifest in our day-to-day lives. And I have a feeling that many of you will be able to relate to some of these. I know it says don't push, but to me this is like a big neon sign saying, push me, push me. I heard it said once this way by one of my students. One of my students said, how am I supposed to think about consequences when they haven't even happened yet? Which really leads us to our next area. Visual imagery. In my house, we call these duct tape moments. Our visual imagery, our visual memory, or non-verbal working memory, is actually responsible for generating multiple visual possibilities for future plans, for solutions to problems. Also is the area of the brain that will generate the visual sequencing, the steps we need to get to meet our goals. If that area isn't working properly, whether we have a disability or under stress, we may end up, in this kind of situation, which is a problem. Self-talk. Don't stare at his legs. Don't stare at his legs. Wait. Some of y'all are staring at his legs. I see you staring at his legs. That verbal working memory is that, that voice in our head. Sometimes I think it's my mom's voice saying, you know what? You know better than to be staring at people, right? It's also the part of our executive functioning skills that helps us talk out loud when we think we've come to a solution. We might talk it through and better be able to plan, think about maybe multiple outcomes, and make some changes if that's not going to, if as we talk it through, it doesn't really fit to meet our long-term goals. In both of these areas I've just talked about, visual imagery and self-talk, or our visual and verbal working memories, play a big part in this next area, which is emotional control. I thought you were never, ever, 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 ever coming home again, so I panicked. The thing is, we all experience that wide range of emotions. All of us do. But when we use our visual and verbal memories, we're able to talk ourselves down. So if we can actually generate pictures of possible outcomes, multiple possible outcomes, then we can choose an outcome that might help us actually bring our emotions down. We can do the same thing when we talk it through. We can talk through, well, you know, my owners actually came back last time. Maybe they'll come back again. Maybe I should just sit here before I chew up the blinds. So we might be able to actually talk down our emotions and regulate them more effectively. If not, we end up with problems. And stress can cause this as well as a disability in executive functioning. Speaking of problems, okay, our primitive brain recognizes that there's a problem. In this situation, the car is parked on the line rather than in between the lines. But it's actually our prefrontal cortex, our executive functioning skills, that actually come together and begin to engage in some mental play. Again, we might create a visual image and then modify it, manipulate it around, and think, okay, well, what if I did this? What if I did that? And again, we would do some self-talking. Okay, if I did this, okay, that's good, but, you know, I might get a ticket for that. I don't know. Anyway, you can see here that technically the problem's been solved, right? Not very effectively. So that can actually be part of a disability, or when we're under stress, our ability to generate multiple options is greatly diminished. So even when we're under chronic stress, we might find that we're not seeing all the available options. Which brings us to an area that is frequently impacted when we have executive functioning issues, and that is social interaction. In this example, the young man says, "That sports team we like." And the young lady says, "They have players." I can't tell you how many conversations I've had that feel just like that in my life. When people who have a disability in executive functioning, when they have difficulty in social interaction, it's probably an everyday experience. But all of us have probably had those moments when we just can't engage socially in the way that we normally can. Those are probably times of stress, and now you know why that might be more difficult for you to engage normally when you're under a great deal of stress. The little girl asks Mom, "What's normal?" And Mom says, "It's just a setting on the dryer, honey." I've had the privilege really of working with people who have difficulties in executive functioning for actually a lot of years. I've worked with people with ADHD and autism, traumatic brain injury, nonverbal learning disorders. And what interests me the very most is how much I personally identify with their struggles. I believe that when we all take the time to learn about how other people see the world, how difficulties in whatever area they're experiencing affect them, and when we especially can identify and see how we may be affected in similar ways, that we become more compassionate and better able to integrate everybody into our society. Thank you.